Hello, my name is Colleen Clemenson, Sandag Acting Planning Director, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the fifth in a series of webinars to discuss a bold new vision for the San Diego region and 5 big moves. In these webinars, we dive deeper into each of the 5 big moves through a panel discussion with Sandag staff and industry leaders. Sandag staff provides our initial thinking on the concepts, and industry experts share thoughts on applications for the San Diego region to consider, given experiences in other places across the country and around the world. All along the way, you are welcome to post questions for our panelists to answer after the presentations conclude. Today, our panel consists of Antoinette Meyer, our principal planner here at Sandag and resident expert on our next OS, and our industry expert, Scott Corwin from Deloitte, based in New York, and Mandy Bishop from Smart Columbus, out of Columbus, Ohio. The big 5 moves include complete corridors, which is the backbone of the transportation system, bringing together highways, roadways, transit, bike, and pedestrian improvements. Transit Leap is high-speed transit that is fast, 60 to 100 miles per hour, safe, convenient, and reliable, providing a compelling alternative to driving alone. Our 3rd big move is the Mobility Hub, and these are centers of activity connected by high-speed transit and providing a variety of transportation alternatives. The 4th big move, flexible fleets, are smaller neighborhood vehicles that are available on demand. They're shared, electric, and moving toward being autonomous. And the subject for today, the 5th big move, is the next operating system. This is what makes the whole transportation system work together seamlessly. Our previous 5 big move webinars explored complete corridors, the transit leap, mobility hubs, and flexible fleets. Today, we'll see how the 5 big moves come together as we dive into the next operating system. Antoinette Meyer, we're going to start with you. Tell us what our Sandag team envisions to be the key elements of the next operating system.
Thanks, Colleen. This is a really exciting time in transportation, and Sandag's vision is perfectly timed to leverage advances in transportation technology and big data. The next operating system, or Next OS, is the brain of a smart transportation system. It what makes the other 5 big moves work together by integrating all modes, trains, buses, and flexible fleets, and providing easy access to a variety of ways to get from point A to point B without a personal car. The Next OS will also help to make our roadways safer and less congested, and will help make transit more reliable and efficient. Next OS does this by collecting and using data from various transportation services and systems to make the entire transportation network operate smoothly and safely. When transportation systems are smart and connected across the region, the data collected provides a real-time view of how the entire transportation network is performing. This helps government agencies plan and manage the transportation system and use data to inform their decisions. It also provides real-time information to the traveling public to improve trip planning and make travel by any mode much easier. Today, the lack of access to a seamless transportation experience is frustrating, and it makes it very difficult to get by without a personal vehicle. The Next OS will deliver on-demand and integrated mobility services that meet the transportation needs of everyone. This is what's known as mobility as a service. Residents and visitors will be able to discover, plan, book, and pay for their travel across any mode through an integrated app. You'll simply enter a destination and go. You will either prepay for transportation as part of a monthly subscription, much like Netflix, or pay as you go using an account linked to the app. The goal is to make it so convenient to get around with Transit Leap and flexible fleets that people won't have to rely on a personal vehicle. Now let's look at how the Next OS could help cities manage the many competing demands for curb space in business districts. This slide demonstrates how Next OS can use data to ensure seamless access to the curb throughout the day for both passenger and freight needs. Before the morning commute, the curb is scheduled by freight providers to deliver goods and stock stores and restaurants for the day. By 7:30, freight gives way to transit and flexible fleets dropping off employees, some of whom may enjoy breakfast or coffee in a pop-up parklet on their way into work. At noon, the lunch rush begins and the curb is used for food vendors and outdoor dining. Into the evening, passenger movement continues as people leave work, grab dinner, drinks, shop, pick up their kids, or head to their evening events. And late at night, the curb is prioritized for freight vehicles again. Passenger movement is at a minimum until the morning, leaving space for delivery services.
Thank you, Antoinette. It's exciting to think about the possibility for seamless mobility and how much easier that can make all of our lives. Next, Scott Corwin from Deloitte, who leads Deloitte's Future of Mobility practice. Scott, tell us more about how you see the NextOS concept could be applied in the San Diego community.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here. I thought we'd start with, let's just take a look at the evolution of human mobility. From the arrival of Homo sapiens 300,000 years ago on the plains of East Africa, our primary mode of transportation has actually been our 2 feet. Early humans wandered and migrated widely, eventually making his and her way across the entire planet. They did so for food and housing and safety and the propagation of their civilizations. If you look at the history of mobility, most of it has actually been in the last 100 to 150 years. And in fact, much of what we know of today, the DNA of that was actually formed long ago. The automobile as we know it today, going back to Henry Ford's time, still fundamentally, he would recognize the car of today. It wouldn't look radically different to him. But there's now a convergence of a whole set of trends that is kind of disintermediating and leading to innovation. And I want to explore that a little bit because I think it sets up really what the operating system is. And it starts with electrification of the automobile. It starts with changing social acceptance and embracing of shared mobility, the emergence of autonomous vehicles eventually, and really lightweight materials and massive connectivity. So if you want to understand the implications, the last really big transformative shift was in the era when the automobile was introduced, when electricity came into being, and we refined oil. And imagine what it would have been like to have lived at that time period. It challenged a lot of traditional modes of thinking, but the convergence of those things really created something very different. So let's start with the automobile. In 1908, the very first Model T rolled off the assembly line in Detroit. To just give you a sense of how impactful it has been even to this day, it's the most sold vehicle ever in the history of the 100 years that we've been making cars. 16 million of them have sold. It started out at $800 per car, and at the end of its 19 years, it dropped to $300. It was the first car for the masses, and it was highly disruptive. Let's think about electrification, which is many who lived at the time believed that electrification was probably the single most innovative advance that has affected our society. And when you look at it, so things like the Niagara power plant, which used hydroelectric power, was a breakthrough because it was an AC plant powered by generators, and it proved the point that the source of power could be very far from where electricity is actually needed, and that was a breakthrough. The electrical grid has lots of advantages, but one of its disadvantages is you can't take it with you. And that's where J.D. Rockefeller, when he established the oil industry, it became the primary fuel source for mobility. And that happened in 1904. Standard Oil controlled 91% of the oil production in the US and a very high percentage of the distribution. But what's changed since then? The DNA of the Model T is recognized in the modern car, from the steering wheel to the pedals to even a modern SUV is very similar. Modern hydroelectric plants, water turns the turbine, generates electricity, transmits voltage across lines, and it's delivered to your home. And similarly with oil refining. But what's interesting is when these innovations happen, I love these two pictures. This is my hometown of New York City. I actually have spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly where on Fifth Avenue this is. So the first picture on the left shows mostly horse and buggies and a few cars. And the one on the right is a period later, and it shows almost all cars. There are a few horse and buggies, you have to look. So in meetings, we ask, how long do you think that took? And since I can't get a survey of this group, on the left side, the picture is from 1900. And the picture on the right side is 1913. So imagine in 13 years, the fundamental transformation that took place. So a lot of the innovation that we talk about today, people say, well, it's 20 years out. Maybe it isn't. And I think that's one of the things to think about. If you go to the next slide, what's happening though, is that this wonderful sort of mode of personal transportation that the personal automobile brought into being, and really iconic since the end of World War II, is being challenged. And it's being challenged for all sorts of reasons. One is massive globalization and population growth and urbanization. And the simple reality is that projections suggest that we will double the amount of cars on the planet between now and 2040. That's just not sustainable. We can't build enough roads fast enough. If we think we have congestion problems today, imagine what it will be like in the future. Secondly, unfortunately and very sadly, we lose a lot of lives to cars. On this planet, we lose every year 1.25 million people. In the US, the numbers are going up. We're up to about 40,000 people. They're directly related to the number of miles driven, even with all of the safety that exists. And then last but not least is this massive rise in total emissions. And it's reaching pretty significant levels, and sustainability is a big issue here in San Diego. And it's something that we need to address. And what's interesting is that all the innovation now is questioning a set of orthodoxies. Do we in fact does mobility require owning a car, or are there other alternatives that allow us to travel more miles faster? Do we have to tolerate the number of accidents and fatalities that exist? And third, can we now leverage renewable energies? So in terms of innovation, and we're all seeing this pretty live, it started with on-demand rentals. Zipcar started in 2000. The ride-hailing revolution, we're now up to 15 million rides per day in the United States. Bike sharing, 50 million rides have occurred in the last 4 years. VIA, which is an on-demand shuttle bus system, has hit 25 million total shared rides in 2018. The rise of electric vehicles is going from 1% to 2%. Scooters, which are both a blessing and a scourge, you could argue, has in 18 months generated 50 million rides and creating some of the largest unicorns. And we now have approval in Australia for the use of drones for the movement of goods over the next 18 months. So the innovation's happening, it's getting adopted at very quick rates. What's really interesting, I think, is now putting all that together. And that's what this idea of seamless intermodal mobility is. So we have a little video. It's about a guy named Ben. He's a young professional who lives in an urban setting. He's an advanced user of mobility. And we created this video to sort of give you a feel for the art of the possible. We are not saying this is how we should move. We are not saying this is the way we will move from point A to point B, but you'll see how we can do certain things seamlessly. There are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of versions of Ben's journey. What's most interesting is what it takes to put it all together.
It's time to go. Let's see how I'm getting home tonight.
Mobility managers use advanced analytics to combine Ben's trip history, current circumstances, data from millions of other commuters, and information from different modes of travel across the city to provide a set of tailored, seamless options. Payment providers allow Ben to pay by the mile. Insurance companies deliver customized per-trip insurance that accounts for Ben's particular route and mode of transit.
I need groceries. I can pick them up at the station and then take a pod home. But I can still get some exercise by biking to the train.
City planners work with the private sector to operate and maintain critical infrastructure, from bike racks to train platforms. Physical assets are increasingly smart and connected, allowing constant real-time monitoring.
Ah, perfect timing. And I don't even need to take my phone out of my pocket to board.
Digital infrastructure suppliers provide ubiquitous, high-speed connectivity for a smooth and secure online experience.
Milk, eggs, bread, ice cream? Yeah, why not?
Retailers and logistics providers enable nearly on-demand provisioning of products to Ben.
Well, I got my groceries. Now I just need to grab a pod, and I can catch a bit of the game.
Fleet operators store, maintain, and deploy shared autonomous vehicles throughout the city. Vehicle manufacturers build an array of shared self-driving options to meet the varying needs of Ben and the millions of other travelers. Content providers offer a variety of options, from entertainment to business applications, each supported by advertisers and subscription fees.
Wow, that was fast. Now I just check the fare summary, grocery bill, rate the trip, and it's time to relax.
To make some version of Ben's journey a reality, the idea of seamless intermodal mobility will require the creation of an operating system where all of the different elements converge. This won't happen on its own, and it needs a conductor like Sandag or Smart Columbus to bring to reality with the help of lots of companies and innovators and communities. So we're now at a really interesting crossroads. There is an enormous promise that the future of mobility makes, which is if we can put all this together and sort it out, we have the ability to move faster, safer, cleaner, cheaper, tailored to the way that we want. We have the ability to create a mobility system that is more inclusive, accessible, and equitable. And the question is, will we choose to go down that path? Because it will require us to approach things in really new ways and to change old habits and old modes. There's a whole movement afoot around mobility as a human right, and that it helps, in fact, create greater economic progress and access to work and healthcare and education and improve families' quality of life. And if we get this right, that is really the promise on the other side of all of this.
Thank you, Scott. You certainly gave us a lot to think about and really sharing how innovation has been moving quickly for actually decades. And it's clear that the way you've presented this to us, that the Next OS could really offer a great way to better connect people and their destinations. I'm going to let everyone in on the fact that we were lucky that Scott happened to be in San Diego, so he actually joined us here in the same room. So it was great to see him give the presentation in person. So now we're going to move to Mandy, who's actually in Columbus, Ohio. And Mandy, if you can tell us about your experience with Smart Columbus, the Smart Columbus operating system, so we may learn about the opportunities that could be applicable in the San Diego region.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm just really excited to be a part of the next operating system discussion. And as Scott really shared, I mean, he identified that there's a lot of disruptions happening in transportation, and really they're happening in technology, data, really many different sectors. The U.S. Department of Transportation saw this and knew it was an opportunity for cities to think differently about how they managed those disruptions when they issued the Smart City Challenge in 2015 for mid-sized cities across the country. We were one of 78 cities that applied for the grant, and then we were ultimately declared the winner in August of 2016. And with this grant, in combination with the Paul G. Allen Foundation grant and a private sector acceleration fund, they've all really served as seed money to springboard an innovation initiative within the Columbus region. The initiative has been branded as Smart Columbus. And, you know, a lot of folks ask me why Columbus. And I'll share that Columbus is one of the country's growth leaders. We're number one among the Midwest 10 largest metros for population, job, and GDP growth. We're a known test market. We're often a living laboratory for restaurant concepts, consumer ideas, political ideas. And we're home to big companies like Nationwide, Wendy's, Honda, and L Brands. And in our application, we were a little bit vulnerable in that we shared that we were great in a lot of ways. But ultimately, we had some key areas where the launch of new technology and transportation solutions could really help us get better. We really shared that with the U.S. Department of Transportation. One example of this is our Next OS, or our multimodal trip planning application with our common payment system. We felt like this was a way to connect low-income people to the shared economy, as well as drive better transportation solutions for everyone. Finally, the vision of Smart Columbus program is to empower our residents to live their best lives through responsive, innovative, and safe mobility solutions. And we're really working to connect people by creating opportunity for residents to get better access to jobs and services while improving overall safety and efficiency of the city's transportation network. Our mayor, Andrew Ginther, firmly believes that mobility is a great equalizer, and all of our work is rooted in driving equity and prosperity for all. As I explored the Next OS, one of the 5 big moves, the description really fit the profile of 2 projects that Smart Columbus is delivering through the U.S. Department of Transportation grant. One of those projects you'll see before you is the Smart Columbus operating system. We've built an integrated data exchange that is a platform built using open source tools. It's cloud agnostic and is the home to all of our data, including our grant focused data. We have about 3,000 data sets on the operating system, and we envision engagement from those 5 sectors that you see on your screen. It was really built as a place where we could collaborate, integrate, and solve community issues. The operating system will serve as that aggregator where mobility data can be analyzed, help drive transportation insights in the region, and ultimately help the city understand more about mobility in the area. So for the Columbus region, what does mobility as a service mean for us? We are really focused on getting more people to ride public transit and leverage new mobility options like scooters, e-bikes, and transportation network providers. It's relatively easy to drive in Central Ohio, and transit usage is not high. About 85% of people get in their car every morning and drive to work. Transit is gaining popularity every day, but we have a long way to go. We know that mobility integration is the next evolution of shared transportation. And as part of our grant portfolio, we are building our multimodal trip planning application dubbed MMTPA with a common payment system, or CPS. And our application will be launched in early 2020. The multimodal trip planning application will serve as a unified gateway for the region by combining the transportation services of mobility providers into a single platform accessible to our travelers using the trip planning application. An account-based common payment system will provide travelers with the ability to pay for all trips with a single account. We have an amazing opportunity in Columbus, and we define mobility as a service as a shift away from personally owned vehicles to a solution that combines both public and private transportation services. And as the Columbus region prepares for 1 million more people arriving in our region for 2050, transit utilization and new mobility solutions are imperative. Sorry to dive into a systems diagram, but I wanted to share a little of the conceptual architecture of our system. Looking at the diagram on the screen and starting in the upper left, travelers interact with the trip planning application and common payment system using a variety of devices, but primarily the smartphone Other devices include personal computers, for example, connecting the multimodal trip planning app via web portal or at kiosk at our smart mobility hubs where you can grab one of those other new mobility devices like scooters or e-bikes or bike share. The multimodal trip planning application is enabled by trip optimization services that are part of the operating system. These services connect with mobility providers such as transit, TNCs, car sharing companies, bike sharing, taxi, to really create customized trip itineraries for the traveler. The common payment system is integrated with the Central Ohio Transit Authority, our regional transit system, fare system, so that travelers may fund a single account to pay for services, enabling them to simply click to pay once for multimodal trips. Payment requests for CODA trip segments will be processed by the CODA fare system, whereas payment requests for other mobility providers will be processed in the provider's gateway. So just a slight difference. Other means of access include an interactive voice response system to allow travelers without smartphones or computer access to plan and purchase trips. We really want to connect in people that don't use technology to the system. It's very important to be equitable. One of the key benefits of collecting and anonymizing trip and payment data is that it provides the city with meaningful information to understand travel behavior. Third parties such as researchers, evaluators, and entrepreneurs will have access to anonymized travel data to apply toward new research or creative development. Like any successful project, our multimodal trip planning application features and functionalities were founded in the exploration of our user needs. We reached out to so many stakeholder groups, including transit users, expecting moms, older adults, neighborhood-specific residents, mobility providers like CODA, Uber, Lyft, Lime, etc. And we really worked to create an application that met the needs of many users and provided new opportunities for all. And really, what did we learn? Integration is hard. When you're doing a public sector project, we really have to coordinate with many dozen entities. Integrating them into our application takes time and understanding both on our end and theirs. How we integrate with our transit authority is different than how we integrate with our campus bus service and different from Lime or Lyft. We have to work very hard to educate mobility providers about the application, including the terms of payment and technical requirements, and we have to make a business case. Why does this benefit you? The private sector is also not necessarily on my grant schedule. I read an article when the Smart City Challenge was announced that called it something akin to the reality series of transportation. We've had a lot of fun. We've cried a few times, and the TV frame has paused as we wait for responses. The private sector is cognizant of your deadline, but not necessarily driving towards that goal. We have early adopters in. We have 8 providers integrated with 2 more to follow, and we're working to get a few more in to make our system complete. And finally, implementation of a coordinated trip planning application is high risk, high reward. I've shared that the private sector is not necessarily on my schedule, but we are having early successes with them, and we'll continue to work with some of the key providers to integrate them into our system. We are taking a risk that some key players in the newer mobility space simply won't join the application. However, ultimately, our application is key to attracting new talent that demands transit access, reducing emissions impact, and avoiding gridlock as our region continues to grow, develop, and compete with the world. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mandy. Really your opening about the mayor's commitment to having residents live their best lives is really a great way to sort of try to capture some of this and to really see how the next operating system is coming to life in Columbus and recognizing the challenges and that it's not easy. We have several questions that have been coming in, and I'm going to start with the first question actually for you, Mandy. You talked about social equity and a goal of transportation being the equalizer. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're seeing the system benefiting people with disabilities, seniors, low-income communities, and I guess on top of that is smartphone access?
Yes, absolutely. What we're really seeing as we continue the conversations is that more and more people are coming to the table. All of the groups that you just mentioned are at the table when we're having these conversations. And ultimately, we're really working to address the user needs of each of those individual groups. And as the mobility conversation continues, as you develop applications, as you implement new programs, having all voices represented is what helps drive mobility. We have a lot of conversation about smartphone access, and what we found is there's high smartphone adoption and high usage. What we do find in some low income or even in age populations is that their data plans are not that great, or they're not super familiar with the technology, and they struggle a little bit. In the areas where there's data plans, we work to launch smart mobility hubs and launch our application on other devices that people can use, and really we're just getting started with a few hubs, but ultimately we're trying to provide other technology and other touch points to help drive equitable access to the shared economy. One of the key things we're doing with our common payment system is ensuring that you can cash load a card so that people that choose not to bank or can't bank are connected to the shared economy. And we believe that's a great opportunity to provide more mobility options more mobility options to everyone, and really connect more folks to jobs, opportunity, and education.
Thank you, Mandy. It's clear you've given this a lot of thought, so that definitely helps us about thinking about an application in the San Diego region as well. The next question we have here is for Scott, and the question is the next SOS or the next OS technology, SOS, the next OS technology, all this technology we're talking about here. Are we ready to implement this today? Is it a future solution? Are there parts of it that we could start today? What are your thoughts on that, Scott?
So it's a great question. And the simple answer is that in its full incarnation, the technology is not here. There are pieces of it. And so today there are 50 or 100 sort of mobility as a service apps that exist out there. They are oftentimes provided by commercial players that are essentially trying to extend the reach of what they're doing, like the ride-hailing companies now connecting with public transit, or I can use one of the ride-hailing services to take a shared bicycle and use it from the same app. So some of that stuff is starting to happen, but what you don't have in a lot of those apps is yet the full idea that you could get from point A to point B and not necessarily pay the sort of retail or list price. And eventually, a really good OS will help us begin to incent people to travel in different ways, to try to deal with congestion, try to help people get from point A to point B faster or more conveniently. So there's all sorts of things that are going to need to happen in terms of the technology. This system doesn't exist anywhere in the world. There are pieces of it, or technologies around the curb, the example that Antoinette was showing, right? Those are wonderful use cases and hugely valuable, because the challenge we have is we're trying to move more people and goods in spaces that are relatively fixed. So we have a big throughput problem. And using the technology to be able to do that is, I think, really the plus side of all of this. There are scores and scores of really fantastic innovation going on, and we're doing a study with the World Economic Forum where we're looking at exactly that, and we'll plan to release that later in the year. Because the truth is, if we could catalyze the adoption of the things that really make a difference, we could improve cities globally.
Thank you for that, Scott. We'll look forward to that report. And what you said gave me another thought about a question for Mandy. And Scott brought up the transportation network companies, so Uber and Lyft, and just wondering if those companies have agreed to participate in your efforts in Columbus.
Short answer, be direct, no. We are continuing conversations with primarily Lyft and going to reconnect with Uber in order to bring them into the system. We understand they want that touch point with their customer. And when you talk about payment, you know, the trip planning application is one component. There's some concerns around how we obfuscate or anonymize our data. And so we've agreed on a methodology with Lyft. It's the Open Streets method. And what we're also, and then the second piece becomes how they get paid. When are they going to get paid? Is there any delay? Is it going to be different? Is there going to be a better percentage? And so those are all terms we're just now getting in front of folks. So we're going to continue to work on those agreements as we move forward to integrate them into the system. But you know, they're all great partners. They're running businesses that are doing phenomenal. They have lots of opportunity and lots of challenges, and we know we're not the number one thing they're doing in the world right now.
Okay, that's good to hear, Mandy. And then for both of you, this question comes up. We're getting multiple questions around the question of privacy. And so with all this data being collected and shared through an operating system, how do we address concerns people have about privacy? And then what about the concerns of, you know, hackers and how, just these are some concerns. So maybe thoughts from both of you on that, and maybe I'll start with you, Scott, on that, and then Mandy.
So it is one of the really core fundamental questions to the OS. And wouldn't it be great if we started with a principle that an OS system wouldn't collect any more data about you than what was absolutely necessary? And we've had a tendency in this sort of revolution of mobility where cities and private players want to sort of sweep up as much data as they can in the view that it would give them greater insight, the ability to affect different types of outcomes, or in a private company to make more money. But I think that this issue, if we're going to really realize the potential of seamless integrated mobility or to build an OS, we have to fundamentally address that. There are some really interesting concepts out there. So there's a piece of work being done at MIT, for example, where they're looking at, instead of the data being housed by an agency like Sandag or a public transportation authority or a city or a private player, what if you created a community trust and you effectively had a governing board that actually, on behalf of the citizens, decided what was the appropriate level and let them be the ones to decide what's appropriate for their community? And I think that's a really interesting idea, right? I mean, so I don't think the answer ultimately is it's a black and white thing. I think there's a lot of gray, but it is, you know, in this day and age and with everything that's going on and all these hacks, it is totally a legitimate concern, and we have to figure out solutions to address it.
Thank you, Scott. And Mandy, do you have anything to add, thoughts on that? I'm sure it's come up in your work.
Absolutely, but I wholeheartedly agree with Scott. As a city, we were asking for way too much data when the scooters came into our region last summer, and it was like, well, do you need this? Do you want this? And we didn't know what we didn't know. And you have to only ask for the data that you need, because it's just going to sit on a file somewhere and it's not going to be used. But secondly, with respect to privacy, we have to take it seriously. And so for us, we're really working, anything we bring into the operating system is aggregated and anonymized. And if we see something, we immediately pull it down, review the data, and ensure that we are not having any, you know, it goes beyond PII, where your name, address, or social security might be out there, but could I combine it with other publicly available data so I could identify that participant or that user? And so we really are constantly reviewing our data, ensuring that we're not inadvertently identifying a person. But the bottom line is you have to take it seriously. You have to engage people that know what they're talking about, that are professionals in the industry, and really create a culture of privacy in the context of a world where we're really open, where we post almost our entire lives on social media, and our smartphone tracks us and it sends us things that we want to do. So we have to be cognizant of the realities of the world we're operating in, but people take privacy extremely seriously.
Yeah, that's very true, Mandy. And then I think, another sort of related question, I'll start with Scott is, and I think Mandy, you had said this in your opening piece about, that some people, no matter what, are sort of going to avoid this approach or using their phone to help do trip making. And as we think about this, what's our role in helping people become comfortable with this concept, aside from privacy or concern with hackers, just becoming comfortable with maybe mobility more as a service and using our phones to make trip making choices? And thoughts on that, Scott, on how we really get people comfortable with this whole sort of concept?
Well, I think it starts with, it's not actually about an app and it's not about your phone. It's about the fact that our daily commutes and our daily patterns of moving are getting harder and more expensive and more challenging. And I think that what you want to do is use the digital technologies in service of trying to make it easier for people to move around. We have a lot of people in Columbus where we've spent time and worked with the Smart Columbus team. I mean, in cities, there are transportation deserts. And the simple reality is that if we don't open that up and enable people to have access to mobility to improve their lives, you can do all these things to try to incent behavior, but ultimately it is about the benefits that we're providing. And there's really powerful research that actually proves that if people have access to physical and digital networks, their family wealth, their household income rises pretty dramatically. So there is a real emergent imperative about this, particularly to ameliorate the sort of divide of the rich and the poor and to create greater social equity.
Well, there's some inspiration, that's for sure. Mandy, would you add anything to what Scott said?
Yeah, for our region, it's simply getting folks to view transit as an option. Again, it's relatively easy to drive in the Central Ohio region, and transit was viewed as a place for people that only had one option for low-income users. And really what we're seeing is a transformation. We're seeing more business community, the business community, more professional writers. They are starting to get on the bus that's driving more service, better routes for all. And we're really starting to shift the conversation and really just helping getting people on the bus. Sometimes we found that simple barriers to riding the bus is feeling like you might look stupid when you're getting on and not know how to use the ticketing machine. Yeah, so we're working to remove those barriers.
Thank you, Mandy. Well, we have come to a close now, and I just want to thank our outside experts, Scott and Mandy, for being part of this. There's much more to come. I want to thank all of you who were able to join us on this webinar today. And if you haven't already subscribed, we ask that you sign up to get email updates about the 2021 regional plan. We will email registered participants when today's webinar is available on stforward.com, and closed captions will be provided in English and Spanish. If you missed any of our other webinars on complete corridors, transit leap, mobility hubs, or flexible fleets, the recordings are now available on our website. So this completes our series of webinars on the 5 big moves, and individually, I'm excited to announce that our next webinar will focus on how we are applying the 5 big moves to make critical connections between where people live and where they work in the San Diego region. During this webinar, we'll highlight why it's important for SANDAG to make data-driven decisions to address traffic congestion and create sustainable transportation options. Also, please connect with SANDAG on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as SANDAG Region, and on Twitter as SANDAG. Finally, in your webinar control screen, you'll see a row labeled handouts where you can download 2 items, an overview brochure. You can tell it's my 5th webinar, overview brochure about the 5 big moves, and a flyer featuring key elements of the next operating system. So our next webinar will be next month, September 25th. Hope you can join us then. And thank you. Have a great day, all.